Acts 17, 1 through 10. When Paul and his companions had passed through Amphipolis and Apollonia, they came to Thessalonica, where there was a Jewish synagogue. As was his custom, Paul went into the synagogue, and on 3 Sabbath days he reasoned with them from the Scriptures, explaining and proving that the Messiah had to suffer and rise from the dead. "This Jesus I am proclaiming to you is the Messiah," he said. Some of the Jews were persuaded and joined Paul and Silas, as did a large number of God-fearing Greeks and quite a few prominent women. But other Jews were jealous, so they rounded up some bad characters from the marketplace, formed a mob, and started a riot in the city. They rushed to Jason's house in search of Paul and Silas in order to bring them out to the crowd. But when they did not find them, they dragged Jason and some other believers before the city officials, shouting, "These men who have caused trouble all over the world have now come here, and Jason has welcomed them into his house. They are all defying Caesar's decrees, saying that there is another king, one called Jesus." And when they heard this, the crowd and the city officials were thrown into turmoil. Then they made Jason and the others post bond and let them go. As soon as it was night, the believers sent Paul and Silas away to Berea. And on arriving there, he went to the Jewish synagogue.
Morning. Thank you for coming today. There's quite a few visitors with us, which is good this morning. I thought so many of our own people are going to be out traveling today, and I started to count up a list, and I was like, man, there's going to be a lot of folks gone, and it might be a good thing that they're gone this morning, so I'm glad that you're here anyway. I have just a couple of things that I want to start with. You can notice on the board behind me right now, our text from today is going to be 1 Thessalonians 4, but before you go there, or if you're already there, go ahead and stick a marker there. 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, if your Bible has one of these, you can just stick that right in the page because that's going to be our main text for today. But our scripture reading from just a minute ago was from Acts chapter 17, and it might not be a bad idea to open up there. And we're not going to come back to this text, but this is just where we're going to start, Acts chapter 17. If you are visiting with us and you don't have a Bible with you this morning, there are at least 2 black Bibles on every row. And so I'll give you the first 2 passages because it's very important to us at this congregation that you read the Word with us. Don't just listen to something that we say or do it because you've always done it, that you open up the Bible and read what it says. And so that's really important to us. If you will open up, it's page 871. That's where you're going to find Acts 17, if you're not familiar with the books of the Bible. And the only thing that I want to point out there is the circumstances that the church in Thessalonica was living under. There's a handful of people here. This is a congregation thing, and I don't know exactly how many people are doing it or how many people are not doing it, but I know that at least a handful of people are doing a daily Bible reading plan that we're all following together as a church family. And so this week, I think in the last couple days, last week we've done 1 Thessalonians 1, 2, and 3. And next week, we're going to finish 1 Thessalonians and move into 2 Thessalonians. And so this is where we are in our daily Bible reading plan. Well, Acts chapter 17 tells you about where that Thessalonian church came from. And there's some really important information. I think maybe the important piece of information that you need to know when you read the letter that Paul wrote to the Thessalonians. You'll notice, I'm not going to read it all again, but you'll notice in Acts chapter 17 that Paul went to Thessalonica, and there were some of the Jewish people there who were persuaded, and they became Christians. And so that is this group of Christians that Paul is writing this letter to. But in verse 5 it says, the Jews were jealous, and they took some wicked men of the rabble, and they formed a mob, and they turned the city into an uproar, and they went, this mob, this violent group of people are so mad at Paul and Silas and their Christianity that they go to Jason's house. They assume, I don't know if they really were or not, but they're staying at Jason's house, and they go, and their plan is to grab Paul and Silas and do who knows what to them. But Paul and Silas are not there, so they just go ahead and grab Jason. They say, well, next best thing. They drag him out, and I just want you, this is very important for the letter of Thessalonians. I think it's very important to read this letter with the understanding that these brand new Christians are living in very hostile circumstances. The city that they live in is in an uproar, like a mob and an uproar. Those are words that you see in the text here. And there's something that I want to show you, and this is probably the most important thing that you need to know about the letter to the Thessalonians. Acts chapter 17 and verse 2, it says, when Paul went in, as was his custom, listen to this. I highlighted this in my Bible because it's really important that you see this. It says, on 3 Sabbath days, he reasoned with them in the synagogue. That's 3 Saturdays. And then the mob comes, beats Jason. Paul and Silas flee. They run to the next town over, Berea. And it's probably worth noticing this also, that those Thessalonians were so rabid and hostile towards Christianity that they chased them to the next town over and started doing the same thing to them there. But that 3 Sabbath days, just think about this for a second. Just imagine that you just heard the gospel of Jesus Christ for the very first time in your life. You've never heard it before. Paul comes to town and you hear the gospel and you go to the synagogue and you get to listen and learn about the gospel for 3 weeks. And after 3 weeks, you're like, this is, I was going to say a baby Christian. This is an infant Christian. You've been a Christian for 3 weeks at this point, and you didn't grow up in a Christian nation. You just learned it for the first time 3 weeks ago. And so you've learned 3 weeks worth of Christianity, and not only are you a baby Christian with 3 weeks worth of information, you're living in an extremely hostile environment. And so the question would be something like, how many of us likely would have survived in those circumstances? I'm talking about spiritually. How many of us spiritually would have made it? You become a Christian, 3 weeks later, your source of information gets run out of town, but all of the mob and the hostile people are still there, and you have to live in it. If you know this about the Thessalonian letter, I think it will really help you to understand. Paul is just really building these people up. He's encouraging them, and he's strengthening them, and supporting them, and he's teaching them really fundamental things like that Jesus is going to come back a second time. And you're like, whoa, what a group of dummies. They didn't even know that. No, they didn't know it. They're brand new, baby Christians, and he's teaching them, hey, this is what we're waiting for. Christ is going to come back, a second coming. And we'll talk about some of that stuff a little bit later today. But that's the thing that I need you to put that in your brain and know that as you do your daily Bible reading and read 1 Thessalonians, but as we go through our text this morning, this is what our reading for tomorrow is going to be. 1 Thessalonians 4, and I'm going to start reading in verse 9. Our text for this morning is going to be verses 9 through 12. Now concerning brotherly love, you have no need for anyone to write to you, for you yourselves have been taught by God to love one another. For that indeed is what you are doing to all the brothers throughout Macedonia. But we urge you, brothers, to do this more and more. I think most of you will probably be more familiar with the phrase to excel still more. To love one another, but to excel still more. You're already doing it. Good job. Do even more of it. In verse 11, aspire to live quietly, to mind your own affairs, to work with your hands as we instructed you, so that you may walk properly before outsiders and be dependent on no one. What I would like to do for the rest of our time this morning is just roll through that list. And I want you to see this, and I've talked about this before. This is not a secret, but I want to say it. I have to say this to you now. When I read this passage, there's a few passages in the Bible that just really hit me square in the heart. One of them is Acts chapter 2, where it talks about the first church, how they were coming together, devoting themselves to the apostles' teaching and to the fellowship, and they were breaking their bread with each other from house to house. And I read Acts chapter 2, and every single time I get goosebumps and I think, I want that. That's what I want in my life and my church family. This passage is probably number 2 on that list. This is what I want in my life when I read through what Paul is saying for this group of Christians. Number 1, let's talk about these point by point. Number 1, to love one another like you're already doing, but to do so more and more. This is not the first time that we've talked about something like this. Jesus said, and we've been going through the Gospel of John on Sunday nights, and we talked pretty recently about when Jesus says to his apostles, a new commandment I give to you, that you love one another. And then you get to chapter 15, and he says, just like the world hates me, the world is going to hate you. But this is what I'm saying to you, my people, that you love one another. And that is almost the exact fulfillment of what you see happening with the Thessalonians here. The world around you, your own synagogue, your own family, the community, your world around you is in a mob and an uproar, and they hate you, and they're after you, but this is the message to the church. But you love each other, and continue to do so more and more and more. There were a lot of things that the Thessalonians did not understand about Christianity. It's going to take all of us some time to learn some stuff. But the first thing that Paul says, at least in this section of text, is you guys got to stick together. Christianity, this is for the Thessalonians, but I also let's bring it into us. Let's talk about this and some of our own experiences and the lives that we've lived and what's brought us to this point in this place right now. Christianity is hard enough as it is without our Christian family bickering and griping and fighting with each other all the time. And you can just imagine these Thessalonians, can you imagine? Last week, I went to the store, and somebody punched me in the face because I'm a Christian, and then I come to worship with my brothers on Sunday, and all it is a bunch of bickering and griping and fighting with each other whenever I come to church, when I go to the world. And Paul is saying to this group of people, listen, guys, it's hard enough out there by itself. This is what we do in here, that we love each other and that we do so more and more and more. And so I would say that needs to be number 1 on our list. This place, not just this place, but Christianity in general, should be a refuge for God's people, not something that you dread. And, man, just set the notes there for 1 second. I'm assuming that this is true, probably for all of us in this room. There have been times in mine and Becky's married life. I need to tell you this. I know I don't have time to talk about this stuff, but we have some visitors here this morning, the Kepharts. They're back here. They're dropping Dylan off. And Dylan's, we all know Dylan. He's one of our campers. If you've been to camp, you know Dylan. Whatever, Dylan. But Bill and Tammy, you don't know them. Tammy's dad, when I said I want to be a Christian, I want to be a preacher, Tammy's dad was the first person who went and bought me a set of commentaries, expensive commentaries. They're still on my shelf downstairs right now. This guy was the most encouraging, come on, come on, come on, come on, let's go, let's go, the most encouraging Christian that you've ever met in your life. And that's the kind of thing that I'm talking about right here. To be a part of a family of God's people who are like, what can I do to support you and build you up and love and let's go? Rather than, oh my goodness, we're going to go to church this morning and it's just going to be another fight. Don't do that. That's the thing. Don't do that. Number two. Number two is one that I love an awful lot. Verse 11, it is aspire to live quietly. I would mark this in your Bible if I were you. That word aspire is found 2 other times in the New Testament. And I'm not going to turn there, but I'll tell you what they are if you want to look at it. The first is Romans 15:20. Romans chapter 15 and verse 20. And this is what Paul says. Paul says, I make it my ambition to preach the gospel. That I make it my ambition is the same word as aspire. The other one is 2 Corinthians chapter 5 and verse 9, where Paul says, whether we are at home or away, we make it our aim to please him. And so when we talk about aspire to do something, what we're doing is saying, strive for this. Make it your aim. This is the thing that we're working for and striving for and trying to accomplish in our life. One commentary said it like this, and I like this. I'm probably going to write this in the margin of my Bible tomorrow. It says, what does aspire mean? A wholehearted and energetic pursuit of an object. So this, make it your wholehearted and energetic pursuit to what? To live a quiet life. To just be still and at peace. And to have a quiet life and a quiet home. I'm going to read something from Philo. Philo is a guy who lived and wrote about the same time as Jesus and the apostles. And you can see a section, I underlined it right down here. That's where he uses the word quiet. But what he's doing is he's saying, this is what is the opposite of a quiet life. And as we read through it, I bet some of you are going to find some of these things in your world right now. Philo contrasts the quiet life with the vulgar man who spends his days meddling, running around in public. That running around, constantly running around in theaters and tribunals and councils, assemblies, meetings, consultations of all sorts. He prattles on without moderation, fruitless to no end. He confuses and stirs up everything, mingling truth with falsehood, the spoken with the unspoken, the private with the public, the sacred with the profane, the serious with the ridiculous, not having learning to remain quiet, which is the ideal when the situation calls for it, and he pricks up his ears in an excess of bustling busyness. I bet when we talk about that run, 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 busy, 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 probably most of us are like, yeah, that describes my home and my life. And the thing that I would like for you to notice is that Paul says to the Thessalonians, this is what I want you to strive for, to have a quiet life or a peaceful life. This might be something worth thinking about. What does it mean to have a quiet life? It's the opposite of a loud life, whatever that might look like. Number 3, in verse 11, the second half of verse 11, he says, to mind your own affairs. Aspire to live quietly and to mind your own affairs. The New American Standard Version says to attend to your own business, but the NIV is the one that we're all thinking right now, mind your own business, is what it says. mind your business. When I think, mind your business, if I'm going to say the words, mind your own business to somebody, what I'm saying is, stay out of mine. But mind your business is not that. It's not, hey, you, Chad, mind your own business. And what I'm saying is, you live your life, I'll live my life, you mind your own business. No, this command, mind your own business, is me, Ryan, take care of my stuff. Mind, care for, attend to my business and my life. Do the things that I'm supposed to be doing. I would like for you to think about 1 Peter 4:15. I'm just going to read it real quick. Listen to this. This is one I think that will shock you. 1 Peter 4:15. Let none of you suffer as a murderer. Okay, let's do that. Nobody kill anybody else. As a thief. Okay, good. Let's not steal other people's stuff. As an evildoer. Great. Let's not be people who do evil. Number 4. Or as a meddler. Stay out of other people's stuff. That's kind of like murderer. Yeah. Thief. Yeah. Evildoer. Yeah. Stay out of people's stuff. Whoa, kind of changed gears there for a second, didn't it? And that's the kind of level that I think the seriousness that we should take with this. And when you put that in the context of the Thessalonians, here we're living, baby Christians, in a hostile environment, and Paul is saying to this group of people, I think this is the general sense. Hey, everybody, let's just be low-key and take care of our stuff. Don't draw any more attention to us than needs to be drawn to us right now. It's hard enough as it is. Let's live a quiet life and let's mind our own business. I was thinking when I was writing through these notes and imagining what some of this stuff looks like, I wonder what Paul would have said if Facebook had been a thing. When he writes about living a quiet life and minding your own business. Number 4, the last part of verse 11, to work with your hands. Look at chapter 4 and verse 13. I want you to see something here. Chapter 4 and verse 13. I can't tell you that this is a 100% certain thing, but I think that this is the general way that most people understand what's going on in Thessalonica. Chapter 4 and verse 13, Paul says, we do not want you to be uninformed, brothers, about those who are asleep, that you may not grieve as others do who have no hope. In verse 1 of chapter 5, he starts talking about the second coming. And so he's telling them, hey, listen, I know that some of your people have died. And he's not minimizing that, but he's saying for us as Christians, it's not the end of everything for us. There's more to come. And so he's teaching these Christians about life after death and the second coming of Jesus. And it seems like, if you go over to 2 Thessalonians chapter 3, it seems like those Thessalonians might have heard that message that Jesus is coming back, and their response was, hey, all right, I'm going to quit my job, max out my credit cards. Like, yeah, Jesus is coming back. Let's do what we want to do. And you know, we don't have to worry about it like all these other losers. And no, that's not what he says. And so he kind of dials it back. In 2 Thessalonians 3 and verse 6, I want to read this whole section. 2 Thessalonians 3:6, he says, now we command you, brothers, in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, that you keep away from any brother who is walking in idleness and not in accord with the tradition that you received from us. For you yourselves know how you ought to imitate us, because we were not idle when we were with you, nor did we eat anyone's bread without paying for it, but with toil and labor we worked night and day, that we might not be a burden to any of you. It was not because we do not have that right, but to give you and ourselves an example to imitate. For even when we were with you, we would give you this command. If anyone is not willing to work, let him not eat. For we hear that some among you walk in idleness. Some of you are not doing the things that you're supposed to be doing. You're just hanging out, walking in idleness. Not busy at work, but busy bodies. Verse 12. Now such persons we command and encourage in the Lord Jesus Christ to do their work quietly and to earn their own living. As for you, brothers, do not grow weary in doing good. If anyone does not obey what we say in this letter, take note of that person, have nothing to do with him, that he may be ashamed. And so what Paul is saying to this church is, guys, no, this is what a Christian life is supposed to look like. We love our people. We live our quiet lives. We mind our business. And we work so as not to be parasites to those who are around us. He talks about going and eating other people's bread and not providing for ourselves. And so if you wanted, this could be what you connect this lesson to Father's Day for, because this is what my dad always did, was to emphasize, he didn't say this verse, but this is what he said. If you're not willing to work, you're not getting anything. This is how you get something. You work for it. And so there are two things. I'm gonna leave this point in just 1 second, but there are two things that I want you to think about. Number one is our responsibility to people who need help. That's a conversation all by itself, and it's not what I'm talking about right now. What I'm talking about right now is to this group of people and what God has told us we're supposed to be doing. And that is either working and providing for ourselves and our families, or preparing ourselves to provide for ourselves and our families. It is not okay to just be one of these people, and I'm not going to do the soapbox thing, maybe just a little, but I'm not going to do the full-scale soapbox thing. It's getting really annoying because there's more and more and more of it, of people, even among Christians, who are aspiring, making it their life's goal to just hang out. And that is the opposite of what Paul said God's people are supposed to be doing. There's two last things that I want to say, and I'll do it quickly, and then we'll wrap this up. The two last things are why. Why do we do these four things? Number one, in verse 12, let me get back to my text here. Number one, in verse 12, so that you may walk properly before outsiders. I think that this is something we should probably think about just a little bit more, and that is the way that we live and the way that we act and the stuff that we write on the internet and every aspect of our lives is something that other people can see. I think about, there's a Parks and Rec episode where Tom, this won't mean anything to those of you who don't know about this, but Tom, he's kind of girly anyway. And Tom, I think he's bowling and he hurts his hand or something goes wrong. And Ron says to Tom, son, people can see you, because he's acting like a big wimp and a fool. And that's what it is for Christians. When Christians are not doing the things that we're supposed to do, God says, hey, you know people can see you, right? There's several things in the Bible. Colossians 4 and verse 5, walk in wisdom toward outsiders. 1 Timothy 3 and verse 7, this is one of the qualities that a man must possess in order to be a shepherd. He must be well thought of by outsiders. Just imagine if one of the patriarch leaders of our church is thought of as a weasel in the community. And then the community is like, oh, hey, I know what that guy's like in the workplace. Imagine what that church must be like. No, he needs to be well thought of. In 1 Peter 2 and verse 12, keep your conduct among the Gentiles honorable. And so why do we love? Why do we live quietly and mind our business and work and provide for ourselves and our families? So that the world doesn't look at us and think negatively about God's family and God himself. And then, number two, he just says it outright, so that you may be dependent on no one. This is a biblical thing. Proverbs 12 and verse 11. I'm just going to read this and we'll wrap it up. Proverbs 12 and verse 11 says this, Whoever works his land will have plenty of bread. The person who works is going to have plenty of food. But he who follows worthless pursuits lacks sense. This is the way the NET says it. Whoever chases his daydreams lacks wisdom. Because guess what chasing your daydreams doesn't do? Feed your family and provide for yourself. And so here you are, not providing like God says we're supposed to, and now I'm dependent upon other people. And Paul is saying to the Thessalonians, we're not going to do that. That's not what God's people are. That's not how we live. So, here's some homework. If you look at this list, I always say this, let's just do little manageable things. How do you eat an elephant? Just one bite at a time. If you look at that list and you think, oh man, I'm failing at all of them, then this is what you do right now. You just start at the top of the list and you say, okay, love the brothers. That's the one I'm going to start working on today. I'm going to start trying to do better about this. And you say, oh man, my life is just a chaos, total chaos, constant chaos. And so you say, okay, the one thing I'm going to start working on today is to live a quiet life, or to mind my business, or to work with my hands and provide for myself and for my family. This has not been a lesson about how to become a Christian if you are not one. But at the end of every lesson, we always have an invitation, and that is, if you're here this morning and you know what you need to do in order to become a Christian, or if there's something that we can do to pray for you or to help you or study with you or anything at all, just come forward and let us know as together we stand and sing the invitation song.